Hello and welcome to Mac Power Users. My name is Stephen Hackett, and I'm joined by my friend and yours, Mr. David Sparks. Hey, David.
Hey, buddy. Episode 750.
I know.
Nice round number.
Yeah, it's fun. 750.
Yeah. Seems like just yesterday we were doing 500 at MacStock.
I know. And 4 digits just around the corner.
Yeah, not that far off.
Mm-mm.
But today we're here to talk about the betas. Apple did WWDC. I ran blindly into the betas. Stephen a little more with a little more consideration, as you should. But we've been using them for a while, and I thought it'd be fun to kind of go through what's happening with all these new features and kicking the tires and some thoughts. And that's what we're going to cover today.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to talk about. Today on More Power Users, I thought we could just continue down the rumor mill and talk some. Yeah. There was a Gurman report and some reporting in the information that Apple is working on thinner devices, iPhones, Apple Watches, MacBooks. And I thought we could talk about those because new hardware also right around the corner somehow. It'll be iPhone season before too long, so we could check in with that.
Thinner is a thing now, so let's look at it. So before we get into the betas, I made jokes about it at the beginning of the show, but as we record this, we are on beta 1, which is very early days in the beta process. Generally, Apple, releases these things. It's usually about 2-week update cycle when they first release them. Towards the end, it gets down to faster, maybe 1 week or less. But at the beginning, they're just kind of like trying to find out what breaks and fix things as they get through the early days of the beta. It can really cause problems for you if you run these betas. So do as we say, not as we do when it comes to the betas.
That's right. It's our standard approach that don't install these betas on devices that you use to pay your bills with or that you depend on every day. And there will be a public beta next month. We're on the developer beta now. It is build 1, and it is early days. And in fact, there's a whole section at the end of the episode today of things we can't test yet because they're not in the beta yet. And it seems like that may be the case for a little while for some of these things. But we wanted to just kind of put a flag in a line in the sand, a flag in the ground. Plant a flag on the moon of of where things are now and what's going on.
Yeah, and I do feel like Apple, at least recently, they're pretty solid with the features that they put in the betas, that those are going to be the ones they ship. Sometimes they make changes to it, but they don't always, they do evolve over the course of the betas. So some of the stuff may change as well, but be careful with this stuff. They're beta 1s. I've already heard from several listeners who are running the betas, and everybody has different degrees of problems and issues. Stephen, have you had any beta bugs bite you since you installed them?
The biggest thing for me, so I've got it on a spare laptop and then a phone and an Apple Watch dedicated to the betas. That's on a separate Apple account, not Apple ID. They've changed the name to Apple account, which I think is a good name change.
Yeah.
I think it's really good. I've had a lot of trouble with iCloud syncing between those devices. It have required a couple of restarts to get things like photo syncing and other things working. That's not uncommon in the betas, and that is like another thing to consider, like having a beta on a device with your real iCloud data. It can act up, but that's not surprising to me. I've done this every summer for a really long time. And it's not that uncommon.
Yeah. I have a running list I've been adding to the outline throughout the week. On the Mac, the biggest problem for me is ScreenFlow is not working right. ScreenFlow is how I pay for my shoes, which is one of the reasons why my Mac Studio does not have a beta on it. It's still running the old operating system, and everything works fine on that one. But ScreenFlow will record voice and it will record the camera, but it will not record the screen, which is in the name and kind of important. I think it's a security thing, and they probably just got to figure it out. iPhone still runs really hot and needs restarting occasionally,
Yeah.
and messages is still wonky sometimes. Just like what it displays, and sometimes messages doesn't work. And this has been a beta thing for years. Like messages always breaks during the betas. I don't know. I think that's the app that probably sees the most work. So that doesn't surprise me. Apple Watch needs plenty of charging. Vision Pro, more stable. I
Yeah,
love it.
yeah, it's it's the best one, and we're gonna talk. Our next episode is all about Vision Pro and Vision OS, and we're gonna dedicate part of that show to its beta. But for now, it's
Yeah.
what you need to know: Vision
Yeah.
OS 2 beta, the best version of Vision OS yet.
Yeah. Somebody's going to write me and say that it bricked their Vision Pro, but all I can say is once I installed the beta on my Vision Pro, everything worked better. And
Who
you know what?
who knew?
Did you have that experience too? Did you try it?
Yeah, I've got it on. I
Yeah.
installed it yesterday. I was like, oh, this is this is better in every way. It's very funny.
But it's a brand new hardware, so that would make sense. Like, version 2 is much different than version 18, right? So there's a lot to fix, and then they got it in there. Every year I wonder if is this the year I'm going to get completely burned with my cavalier attitude towards betas, because it's going to happen. One year, like my iCloud data is going to get smoked or something. But thankfully, I'm very very careful about backups and everything. But this was not the year. I skated through another year without the beta apocalypse. How would you call it? How do you combine beta and apocalypse?
Beta apocalypse. I'm more
There you go.
concerned that you think that you're out of the woods. Like this is a long
Yeah, that's
summer,
true.
buddy.
That's true. So far.
There's a lot of time left, and that is something that will happen sometimes. Not iCloud specifically, but very often in the summer there will be a beta build that's pretty good, and then the next one will like break lots of things. Right?
Yeah.
We are using something that is being actively developed, and that means that things change, and it can be anything from third-party apps not working right to features not being implemented correctly. Bad battery life is very common. Just earlier, I looked down and I had my my phone with the beta on it on my desk as I was doing some stuff this morning at work, and it was just rebooting. I was like, "What are you doing?" Like I didn't touch it.
Yeah.
These things happen. It's understood. I will say, I said this last year and I'll say it again this year. If you run into a third-party application that isn't working on the beta, like chances are the developer knows it. If there's a way to let them know nicely, like, on social media or an email, they probably already know. The App Store, thank goodness they changed. This is a really good change. You can't review apps in the App Store from a beta, which is really good because people give you a bad rating because your app crashed at launch on a beta. That developers can't necessarily fix things in the beta process very easily. There are some rules around that with App Store review. Sometimes you just can't get a fix out until the release is out. So the way I view this is I try to be a team player. Like if there's an app that I use and I run into an issue, I try to find a way to let the developer know nicely, respectfully. They probably already know it, but sometimes it's nice to hear it, or maybe they don't know about it. But going in guns a-blazing, hey, your thing is broken on the beta, like that's not on them. So some patience and grace with the developers is always good.
I mean, we tell this story every year, and our listeners don't need to hear it. I think our listeners are not the good people doing that, but the best example of this I've ever seen is I was at WWC, and then I attended the State of the Union with a developer friend.
Mm-hmm.
So the State of the Union happens 1 hour after they finished the keynote. And back, at least that year, they had released the betas as soon as the keynote was done. So the beta has been out an hour, and I'm sitting in a chair next to a developer, and he shows me this scorching email from some user complaining that they just installed the beta and his app doesn't work, and how come he hasn't fixed it yet? And I'm like, dude, this thing hasn't been out 60 minutes yet. I mean, he's in the State of the Union. Leave him alone.
Yeah.
But I never really realized how much of a problem it is, because I honestly don't believe anybody listening to the show would do something like that. But there are people out there that do that, and it's completely nuts. If you do want to do as I do and not as I say, the way to get to the beta, you can get a free developer account right now. if you do it, I'd recommend if you've got like an extra iPad or an extra laptop that you're willing to burn to the ground if you have to, that's the way to go about it. Do understand though, like some betas may trash your iCloud data and then that bleeds over into your non-beta devices. So this is not without risk. There will be a public beta in July. I think that's a much safer track to go on if you
Yep.
really want to play with the betas, and that's what I would recommend. But I know people want to get to it sooner if you want that the developer account's the way to go. But just probably the best thing to do is get an extra device and wait for the public beta, and then you can test this stuff out. And the one thing this year is, like Steven said, a lot of the features that we really want to test aren't there yet. So it's okay to wait because getting on the beta, you still don't get the AI and some of the features that we'd like to see yet.
So this week we want to talk through some of the apps and changes. Not necessarily the OSs themselves. And I thought we should start with the Photos app because it's used by basically everybody, and there's some pretty big changes this year.
Yeah, it's always tough to take an app like Photos and change the user interface because it is a very common app and it's used by a lot of non-power users. And any change to those people is bad change. Like they just want it to look the same every time they open it. And when this thing releases, they're going to find that that's not the case.
Yeah, it is a pretty radical departure. So gone is the old design with the tabs across the bottom. You would have library and for you and a couple other things. And they have brought all of that into one view, and it's really pretty strange looking. It doesn't really look like any other first party application from Apple, or you still have your grid of all of your library. It's sort of the top, I don't know what you call it, 2/3 of the screen maybe, and
Yeah.
then below that you have a bunch of different types of collections, different groupings, and we'll go through those in a second. You can still get to the old view. You kind of scroll down on the grid and it slides down, and then you still get the day, month, year thing at the bottom. But overall, I'm not sold on this. It's nice that I have, I guess, faster visibility into some of those collection type things. And I know at the talk show they mentioned, Apple mentioned that, hey, people weren't using those, and we wanted people to have quicker access to all the organizational tools that we have built in now. But most of the time, I just want to open the grid and scroll back a day and find that picture I need, and that takes more time. I'm just not sold on this being much more than kind of rearranging things for rearranging things' sake. I'm not sure how I feel about it.
Yeah, I'm more upbeat on this. I understand what they're aiming for, and you can get to your list of all pictures. The most recent ones are on the screen when you open it up. You are right that you scroll the opposite direction. I do wonder how many people will realize that you can do that, because this is the app that goes out to everybody, right? Like, are the grandmas going to think to scroll down to see more pictures? Or are they just going to go, into the gallery views and the curated views? But I think I am on board with what they're trying to do here. I hope they're keeping an open mind to make tweaks to this as we get through the beta. I'm more upbeat on it. And I shared it with a couple family members who are not power users, and they got it. They were able to use it. So I don't think it's that bad, but I'm also always leery of making changes to apps like Photos because I know everybody's going to lose their mind.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure they didn't go into it lightly. And I don't mean to downplay the new work on the collections and the automatic organization, because I think all that stuff is actually really good, and I really like some of the additions. Like they have a new trips collection, and it looks at the dates and the GPS location of photos, and will pull trips together. That's awesome, and I really think that's a very useful thing. And when you're looking through your photo library, how often you're like, oh, that was on our vacation last year. Surfacing that sort of stuff is awesome. I just think it also probably could have been done without getting rid of that tab view controller thing.
Yeah. I do think this is probably pretty close to what they're going to do. I like the granularity in it. For instance, like if you go into the trips view, you get all trips listed by location, but you can also drill down by year. So you can say, well, I think we went to Hawaii in 2012. You can get to that very quickly and get a nice view into it. Overall, are you all in with the Apple Photos app at this time?
Oh yeah, yeah. I've got
Yeah,
almost 80,000 things, and we have shared photo library like between my wife and
yeah,
I. Still no albums in the shared family library, and I think like looking at all this collection stuff, I think albums are continuing to be downplayed across Apple's
yeah.
photo ecosystem in favor of more automatically generated collections. And I guess I get that. All these things are better. Like if you make sure you've got location data and if you do some tagging, perhaps, although, yeah, I still have a lot of mess to clean up. Like I got a bunch of images that don't have any location data and I have them in a smart album on my Mac. And every once in a blue moon, I spend like 20 minutes, adding locations to pictures.
That's part of the AI boon, honestly, is going to be photo organization. I mean, if we go back, well, this is episode 750. If you go back to early days, there was a lot of discussion of the best tagging approach for your photos library and
Mm-hmm.
organizational techniques. And I don't think most people do it anymore. And I think, especially when the AI stuff gets fully baked, I don't think it'll be necessary.
Yeah, I think that's where they're headed for sure. And this release definitely points in that direction. I think another example of that is like, why can't we just detect what's a screenshot or not? And there have been attempts at this in the past with photos, but now it is straight up like its own media type, and you can sort them, or filter them in or out of your library really easily. So that sort of stuff does make the organization process much easier and simpler.
I would like to see them, another AI feature I'd like to see get added here is, how Gemini has a feature that looks for similar but not identical photos. I have the habit whenever we get a group of people together. We just had a family event over the weekend. I'm looking through my album right now, and every time there's a group of people, there's not just one picture of them. There's like 7 or 8. I just push it. I just push the button repeatedly because you never know which one's going to get with everybody's eyes open and looking at the camera, and you've got to pick one. It's not that hard to pick one, but it takes time.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's something that AI could do. And for those of us with these massive libraries, a lot of time there's a bunch of fat in that library that could go away if you just said, look at every photo grouping and pick the 1 or 2 best and delete the rest.
Yeah.
And I was surprised they didn't announce a feature like that. Gemini still has it, so that's good. But I'd like to see Apple kind of get into that space.
And it's weird because they already kind of do it in different ways. So like if you shoot a burst of photos on your iPhone, it picks the best ones, right? Like,
Yeah.
And I guess that's a little bit different at capture as opposed to like going in and doing something in your library. Like I understand maybe the stakes are higher there, but you're right. I think if with some guidance, it would be nice to be able to do those things. One sort of question I have around these collections, though, is I feel like there's some, and maybe it's fine. There is like some overlap. So they have media types and utilities. So media types are like videos, selfies, screenshots, animations. But then utilities is hidden, deleted. So if you hide an image or delete an image and it's in the trash for 30 days or whatever. And then handwriting and illustrations, like I don't understand some of the organization within the Photos app. Like, why is animations treated one way, but handwriting or illustrations another? Like, what's the difference between all those things? I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll be
Yeah.
cleared up some. But they are making progress here. And as all of our libraries get bigger, we need smarter tools to manage them, to your point. And I think it's clear they're moving in that direction.
Well, I mean, your statement, 80,000 pictures in your library, I think that might not be an outlier. I think a lot of people listening to the show maybe have more than 100,000 because it's so easy. And then if you have kids on your account as they get older and get iPhones, I mean, it accumulates. And now we've got the sharing feature. So Yeah, this is a thing, and they're trying to make it, future proof it for people with large libraries.
Yeah.
I'm generally pretty positive on this. I think it's better than it was, in my opinion, but it's very much an opinion thing. I think there'll be plenty of people that look at it and prefer the old system.
Yeah, I don't mean to be down on it. I think
Yeah.
I think all the tools are really good. I'm just not quite sold on like the actual design work. But the tools are all really great, and I think it's awesome that they're giving us the ability kind of get the things we want to get at without having to, spend hours manually inputting a lot of metadata.
This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by NetSuite. Go to netsuite.com/MPU for the leading integrated cloud business software suite. Quick math. The less your business spends on operations, multiple systems, and delivering your product or service, the more margin you have and the more money you keep. But with higher expenses on materials, employees, distribution, and borrowing, everything costs more. So, to reduce costs and headaches, smart businesses are graduating to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one platform and one source of truth. With NetSuite, you reduce IT costs because NetSuite lives in the cloud with no hardware required, accessed from anywhere. You cut the cost of maintaining multiple systems because you've got one unified business management suite. You improve efficiency by changing all your major business processes into one platform, slashing manual tasks and errors. Over 37,000 companies have already made the move. So do the math. See how you'll profit with NetSuite. Most businesses survive or fail in that margin. It's paying attention to the little things that NetSuite can surface that can make all the difference for you. You have to find ways to cut costs and boost business performance, and there's no better way than NetSuite. By popular demand, NetSuite has extended its one-of-a-kind flexible financing program for a few more weeks. Head to netsuite.com/MPU. That's netsuite.com/MPU. So go to netsuite.com/MPU one last time, and our thanks to NetSuite for their support of the Mac Power Users and all of Relay FM.
Up next, let's talk about Notes. We have talked about Notes a lot over the years. It is an app that continues to get attention. It feels like basically every year from Apple. And there's a lot of new stuff this year. Let's start maybe with the audio transcription tools. That's pretty cool.
Well, even more meta, let's just talk about the fact that Notes always gets substantive updates. It reminds me of the old days in iWork where every year Keynote got better, and the story was always that, well, Steve Jobs uses Keynote, so that's the one that gets the most resources. But it is interesting to me that calendar gets very little attention each year. Reminders get some attention, but Notes always gets lots of attention. And I'd love to know the story behind that, but this year doesn't fail. I mean, Apple Notes again got a solid list of new features, starting, like you said, with live audio transcription.
Yeah, so you can now do the thing that GoodNotes and some other apps do where you can have your Notes app actually record, while you're taking notes. It's not quite as full-featured as some others. At least in Dev Beta 1, my experience has been it doesn't tie like a note that I take to a timestamp in the file, but rather it'll record, and it looks just like the voice memos user interface. Like it kind of looks like voice memos just kind of gets like put in the sidebar of your note. It's actually
like
kind of interesting.
On.
Yeah. I bet that's exactly what it is. But it'll record, and then the file gets saved as an attachment in your note. You can go back and listen to it. And it's again, it's not as full featured as like some more specific tools around this. But if you are just in a meeting and need to record and are going to take your notes alongside, then it's perfect.
Yeah, and there's a pair of quotes in the button. So by default, you see a waveform as the recording happens. But if you push that button, it's live transcription. So it gets you live transcription of the recording while it's taking place, which is probably some form of whisper. My guess is that's an AI implementation. But it's good, and it's pretty solid. I ran a bunch of tests with it, and It did a good job. People in the labs have already seen some of the videos I've made on it, and I think it made like one mistake in a 3 paragraph transcription. So that's pretty good. And it's just built in and it's located in the file. So I think there'll be plenty of people that have a use for that feature, like students and people who are working with people, like collecting information in meetings, things like that. And then it's saved to the file, and you get like all of that adds on, it piles on. The iCloud backup, the handwritten notes, all the other stuff that Apple Notes does. Well, now it does the audio transcription too. So that just makes it a little more useful. Let's talk about math notes. That's the thing that got a lot of time in the keynote. And I feel like that one, to me, has a bit of a reality distortion field around it because it was cool,
It is cool.
You write down math equations with your Apple Pencil on your iPad, and then it solves them for you when you just put an equal sign in. I've spent a fair amount of time playing with this, and it basically does what it says on the tin, although I found that doing more complicated stuff, it gets confused. Part of it, I think, is that my handwriting isn't, I do small caps printing, and I think that's probably what it's least good at. But, putting together an estimate, like we're getting some work done on the front yard, and I needed to, order some material. I needed to hire a guy. And like I did all of that on a sheet that I built in Apple Notes with this new feature.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked just fine. It's kind of fun when you draw the line at the bottom and it fills in the total for you. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So this kind of takes shape in different ways. So if you're on the iPad, you can use the Apple Pencil. And that's also in Calculator. Like this is a notes and calculator feature kind of together. But on the Mac and the iPhone, you can just type. And so you can, literally just like type out your equation like you would in Google Sheets or Calculator or Solver, which I think is kind of the closest thing we've had to this. And you hit the equal sign and then it does the math. My kind of only hang up with this is I wish that they had merged this or brought this into the tables feature. Notes got tables added a couple years ago, I think, maybe last year. And they're basically just really basic columns and rows. You can't do any like, hey, I've got all these numbers, average them at the bottom like you can in Excel or Numbers or Google Sheets. And I would like them to bring math notes into tables so I could have some, simple budgeting, or like I have a note where I keep the page views on 512 every month. And I have to do the addition basically manually because the table in notes has no knowledge that math even exists. And I would like them to bring those together.
Yeah, agreed. I feel like this feature demos nicely, but I'll be very curious to see how much it's used, even if we could get that data. I don't think it's going to be used as much as people think. And I think that it was a great thing to talk about this week, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'm curious too. That'll be something to keep an eye on.
Now, this next feature is the one for me. Like, if there's one thing that Apple got it that I wanted, it's collapsible headings. So I use, Obsidian, which has had this, I think, since the beginning. And what it means is you put a heading and then you put some text underneath it, and then you can collapse it into the heading. And when you get a long note, it's really great. Like, I have many things I do where I have like series of information. Like in a lot of my notes, I have what I call a comms log. So every time I call somebody about the thing, under that heading comms log, I've got a running list of date entries with stuff I did on it, people I talked to. But I don't need to see that until I need to see that, right? Well, if I do it in Apple Notes, up until now, I just had this massive list of stuff to look at, right? And now it's cool. I can just fold up that heading and it's out of the way until I need it. And I've always been jealous of that feature for Apple Notes. Like, I wish Apple Notes had it. I don't know if we talked about it on our Apple Notes show, but it's something on my mind. I didn't think Apple would really go that far. Like, it felt to me like kind of a power feature that Apple would ignore. And here it is, and it works great. And I'm using that one already daily in the betas.
I love the way they did this, where you don't have to tell it, hey, this section is going to be collapsible and this one's not. If you have a header or a subhead and there's anything under it, it just automatically picks up a disclosure triangle next to it. And I think that's totally the right way to do it.
Yeah, agreed. Nice stuff. Nice
Mm-hmm.
stuff here. Like you said, good implementation. That's a power feature in Apple Notes. Apple Notes continues to impress. And then the last piece of this is highlighting.
Yeah, this has to have been pretty high on the list of things people wanted in Apple Notes. Like, it's so great in Notion and Craft and a bunch of other apps like this. So you can select text and you can highlight it. There are just a handful of colors: purple, pink, orange, mint, and blue. So just 5 options, but they all look really nice, like as you would expect from Apple. Like the colors are very pleasing; they're not like harsh colors, and it's pretty great. I mean, I think that's a super useful thing in a Notes app to be able just to quickly mark something as important to come back to later. Um, I think additional colors or making it a little bit simpler to get in and out of this would be nice, but I'm super glad it's there, and I think a lot of people are really going to love it. Are you a big highlighter in your notes?
No, not particularly. What I use them for in Obsidian, because I put all my book notes in Obsidian, and I'll go through, and so I get highlights with Readwise, but I'm very liberal with those highlights. Like I highlight a lot when I read a Kindle book, and then I'll go through and I'll highlight the highlights, if that makes sense,
Sure.
in Obsidian, because then I can like get what's really necessary. The stuff I use Apple Notes for, I haven't I haven't felt like the same need for highlighting, but now that the tool exists, I'm sure I'll find an excuse to use it somewhere. How about you?
I'm not a huge highlighter either. I was actually kind of scrolling through some notes thinking about this. It's not a huge thing for me. I do, however, use a lot of like subheads in notes. And so, like you, I think out of all this stuff, as silly as it seems, collapsible section headers, they got me. You know, it's like, okay, that's something I'm going to immediately take advantage of.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so useful. In fact, now when I go on my non beta Mac and I open Apple Notes, I'm mad when the things aren't folded. Like, what's going on here? Oh yeah, this is the old software.
Yep. You got to wait to the fall.
Okay, so Apple Notes got lots of support. Calendars and reminders got some support, but less so.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing here is that you can now see reminders in calendar. And I got 2 like opening statements. One, Fantastical does this, and it's pretty great. But
VisiCal
also,
does it too. Yeah.
uh, also way back in the day, like 100 years ago, iCal, the precursor to calendar, did this. It had tasks in the sidebar. They didn't sync anywhere, right? It was just like it was just on your Mac. I mean, this is like the 10.2 or 10.3 days or whatever,
Yeah.
20 years ago. But how this works is when you're in calendar, any reminders with a time basically just show up at that time on that date in your calendar. And they're just a little like line and they've got the text in there. If a reminder does not have a due time but a due date, it shows up as an all day event. So those are there as well. And as you're kind of going through your day, you can see like, oh, I've got this call from 2 to 3, but at 2:30, I need to remember to, put that, that letter out at the mailbox or whatever. So I think it's nice. I think a lot of people struggle. We've talked about this a lot. Struggle the line in between what's a task and what's an event. And this sort of solves that for some people. Like, well, you can see it all if you want to in calendar.
Yeah, it does and it doesn't. I like what they really need, I think, is a tasks like button at the top. They have day, week, month, year. If they're going to incorporate tasks in the application, there should be a tasks view. Other apps that combine calendars and tasks usually do that. And this one is kind of cryptic. Like you said, if it has a due date or a due time, it shows up on the physical calendar, but it's really not full integration of reminders in any way I think most people would use.
I mean, you can create reminders from calendar, but you're not really managing them, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. Like if you so you can create one and you get the reminder creation user interface. You know, like how we said voice memos was like shoehorned into notes. They've shoehorned parts of the reminders app into calendar. And you can edit a future reminder, but you don't have like a bird's eye view of all of your tasks across all your projects, right? That's still what you're going to go to reminders for. So it's not, they haven't merged the apps, right? They've basically just brought the view in with some editing. And there's even some limitations there. So, and this comes down to the differences, and this has not changed. It still frustrates me that reminders on the Mac isn't as easy to use as it is on iOS. An example here is when you create a reminder from calendar on iOS, it lets you select the list the task goes on. And on the Mac, at least as of beta 1, it just goes to the default task list because that UI doesn't, the inspector on the Mac does not have a way to change the list a task is on. I have open feedbacks about that if someone at Apple wants to look at those. Um,
Yeah.
but it is, that's a bit frustrating. But yeah, it's not management per se. It's just, you can kind of see him in one place. And I did want to briefly mention that, OmniFocus and others have like a forecast view. And in that forecast view in a lot of those apps, you can bring your calendar events into your task manager. But Apple didn't do that. So you can't see your events and reminders. It's only the other way around.
Yeah, but there is a whole, like, to put this in modern context, there's a whole flock of new web apps. There's a new one, seems like every month, that tries to combine calendars and tasks. I mean, I think that's a natural combination. Most of them give you a nice user interface that shows your reminders. Then you drag them onto the calendar to create block scheduling to do the tasks. And it's a good workflow. Sorted, the app Sorted is another one that I think kind of does stuff like this. Fantastical kind of does stuff like this. And then there's all these web apps. But this is not that. I feel like they started on this journey, but they didn't really finish it. Like, I feel like this feature should have got fully baked, and I feel like it's only half baked, in my opinion. So I'm not that excited about it. I'm not that excited about, I mean, there's just not much of a difference in calendars and reminders at all.
Yeah.
In my head, there's a story where Apple one year does to Apple calendars what they did to Apple Notes and said, we're going to make this a serious calendar app. And they put the time and money and effort into it, and really tempt me, but that just hasn't happened yet. Reminders has had some good years, but this wasn't a particularly good year for reminders. There's a couple little changes. So when you open up calendars, it says, what's new is scheduled reminders, suggested events and locations for hotel bookings. Well, they've always kind of done that, and time to leave. So that's a feature that's been in others over the years. And now they've added that. And that's for calendars and reminders. They allow subtasks and smart lists, which is good. I'm a big fan of smart lists. Subtasks make sense.
Yep.
I believe you can put subtasks and templates too now. There's a recently deleted list, and the shortcuts got more actions, which is all good. But like the last few years, I think they've done a better job of adding features to both of those apps.
Yeah, it definitely seems a bit slower than some years. My big wish still is just that the Mac and iOS versions would be more similar in reminders.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know you're not a fan of the inspector in reminders.
Yep. It kills me.
Very intensive. And like, there's a couple features. I feel like a defer date. And there's just a couple things that I'd like to see them do. It's a pretty app. It looks good, but it does have limited functionality. And, we never expect Apple to make OmniFocus, out of reminders or even some of the advanced task managers. But I feel like they've made so much progress that it gives me this glimmer that they're going to get it even a little closer to those power apps. And this wasn't the year for that. I also want to say, just quickly on calendars and reminders, is I felt like this was an area ripe for Apple Intelligence, and they made some reference to it in the presentation. We haven't seen it yet, but I kind of hoped that they had been more clear that they're going to use Apple Intelligence to help you manage these lists and create and schedule events. I'm not sure that that's going to do that yet. It didn't seem like they were really going down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, it seems much more like, again, the Apple Intelligence stuff hasn't shipped in beta, but you can maybe ask Siri more about your reminders or events. But yeah, I would like some more proactive things here. An example that I've seen in other software and that I think makes sense is like, I'm trying to schedule a breakfast with somebody. Calendar knows what mornings I have open between 8 and 9 a.m. But getting that to me in a way that's useful, or suggesting that, oh, you could have breakfast on Tuesday or Thursday next week, like those sorts of actions are very common. In reminders, hey, I'm making this sort of task, suggest the list that it might go in based on my thousands of other tasks with similar names that have gone in that list over the years, right?
Yeah.
And it seems like that stuff's just not there. And maybe it'll come. But I think you're totally right. These apps they really have the potential for Apple Intelligence to supercharge, and hopefully they're looking at ways to do that.
Yeah, I just got my renewal for OmniFocus. I got to pay my $100 to get it for another year, and that was not a hard decision. Like reminders isn't making me, want to stick there.
Yeah. Every year, I think listeners will know that I give reminders a shot, and I don't feel like there's much in here that would push me over the edge. Personally, I don't really care for having reminders and calendar events in one place. I treat them as really separate things, and so for me, I don't feel the call away from Todoist either. But there's someone out there, I'm sure, who's like super psyched about these changes, and if that's you, that's awesome. The rest of us, I think, are still hoping that Apple really turns its eye towards these apps in a bigger way.
I'd love to see them tempt me more, but they're just not there yet. I will say, however, the shared reminder lists are just killer. It's just so integrated to my family. I've got them all trained now. When they go to Target, they check the Target list. So it's magical. I just sit at my desk here and say, buy more Kind bars, and then they just show up in my studio at some point. I love it.
It's great. It's really great. This episode of Mac Power Users is brought to you by ZocDoc. You shouldn't have to feel awkward when talking to your doctor. The good news is ZocDoc is the place where you can find and book doctors who will make you feel comfortable and actually listen to you. We're talking about tens of thousands of doctors here, all with verified patient reviews, so you can make sure they're the right fit before you meet them in real life. With ZocDoc, you've got more options than you know. ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare highly rated in-network doctors near you and instantly book appointments with them online. Once you find the doctor you want, you can book them immediately. No more awkwardly waiting on hold. And these doctors all have verified reviews from actual real human patients. We're talking about booking appointments with tens of thousands of top-rated, patient-reviewed, credible doctors and specialists. You can filter specifically for ones who take your insurance, are located near you, and treat basically any condition you're searching for. The typical wait time to see a doctor booked on ZocDoc is between 24 and 72 hours. That's it. You can even often score same-day appointments. The quality of doctors on ZocDoc is great, and those real human reviews back that up. You can see what actual patients are saying, and that's what sets ZocDoc apart and why I think it's such a valuable tool. So go to ZocDoc.com/MPU and download the app for free. Then find and book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc, ZocDoc.com/MPU. Our thanks to ZocDoc for sponsoring the show and supporting Relay FM.
Well, we buried the lead, Stephen. They changed completely the way the home screen works on the iPhone.
and the iPad, both,
and the
same
iPad.
year.
Yes, yeah. Well, that I do feel like the Swift UI boon has started. The ability to get multiple new features across multiple platforms. I think that's just going to become the standard from Apple
Yeah.
because of this, and that's great. That being said, what do you think of it now that you've spent a week with it, and what are you doing with it?
I think it's really exciting anytime Apple gives people the ability to customize their devices. And yes, you can make some pretty wild looking home screens now with some of the tinting and things that we'll get into. But I think it's great. I think people want in particular their phones. They want their phones to feel and look like them. And with these new tools, you can do that better than ever.
Yeah, I agree. And I am actually dealing with a little crisis here because, like, suddenly I can put icons anywhere on the desk and like, or on the home screen, and like maybe I do want some space here. And how many icons do I really need here? And it's really got me rethinking my whole widget strategy. What do you call that screen to the left of the home screen? Where you
The
can have a stack.
the Today view.
The Today View. I've really gone hard on Today View now with like the standard widgets I always want to see, and so I'm putting those over there, which gives me more room on the home screen. With me, of course, it's all dependent on which focus mode you're in. So I have a separate home screen for each focus mode. And I am really kind of enjoying and stressing on this because I want to make it just right. One of the discoveries with this is that you can also, they have small icons versus big icons. Now, I don't think we mentioned it in the reaction show, but you can have icons show up without the app name underneath them. And the icon is slightly bigger because it has more space.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to say, I love this. I haven't read those app names in 15 years. I
Yeah.
don't need to see them. And I like the bigger screen that, these developers put all this effort into these icons. Now they're bigger. That is for me a win immediately. But I am not completely sorted out on what I'm doing with this. I think at some point in the future, I'd like to do a show where we share home screens and kind of focus modes and strategies for these. But I'm not to a place yet that I have all my decisions made. Any of you on the beta, if you want to go into the forum and talk about what you're doing with it, I'd love to get thoughts from other people. But this is like a bit of dessert that I have yet to eat here in terms of setting these up.
Well, I still think it's early days too. I do like the larger size. I think that's really nice. I think it's nice looking, obviously much cleaner. There's an accessibility angle there as well. The thing that I think needs a little bit more time is the different customizations for the icons themselves. And so you have light mode, which is what we've always had. You have dark mode, and then you have tinted. So dark mode will show a darker version of the app. So if you have a bunch of like first party apps from Apple, they all now have darker backgrounds. Some of them look better than others. I think they'll tweak those over time. And that is separate from whether or not your phone is in dark mode, right? So you can have your phone in light mode, right? Where, the background of messages is bright white, but you could still run the home screen icons in dark mode. So those are unlinked things. And I think that was the right call to have those unlinked. The tinting is kind of next level. And so tinting is only available, it basically forces the dark mode look. All of your app icons go dark, including ones that don't go dark currently in dark mode, because developers will need to supply light and dark icons. And optionally, I believe it's optional, they can submit or have in their app an icon that kind of tells the system how to tint it. So right now in the beta, some icons get really weird when tinted, and some widgets get really weird when tinted because it's not quite fully defined yet. But the tinting will basically replace sort of the white point, I guess, if you will, with a range of colors and saturation. You can select that manually. You can also go in and change the color based on the wallpaper. So they have a little eyedropper, and you can pick the color based on a section of the wallpaper, which I think is really nice to build a custom aesthetic. But I think not having tinting on the light mode icons is a bit of a miss. Like, I think it would be nice to have that available in both light and dark mode. But again, like, hey, more options for people to get what they want. That's super great. And Apple has not always done that sort of thing. And so I always applaud it when I see it.
Yeah, I feel like I have what you would call a lack of vision for tinting my iPhone. Every time I've played with it, it just looks dumb to me. But I've never been tempted by like those super customization apps either. But let's just see how it all plays out. But I think there's a spectrum here of how far you want to go. Maybe you just want the big icons. Maybe you want to do different spacings. Maybe you want the color the whole screen. I think coloring could make a lot of sense if you're trying to get a focus mode home screen set up that really lands for you. So you're like, if I'm in work mode, everything's blue. If I'm in personal mode, everything's green. I could see something like that. I solved that problem with the wallpaper. Like, I do have a blue wallpaper for work mode, but I think there's options here. It's just the point is it's going to be fun. Everybody gets more ways to express themselves. And I think that's something very important for this technology to give people that. I mean, that's one of the great things David Smith did with his Widget Smith is gave people these tools. And I think Apple is like on board with that with this release.
I think so too. And I think they've looked at the popularity of apps like that and want to give people better and more options. In a way, this is like an extension of the lock screen customization we got previously, because those have a lot of color and tinting options too, right? Where you can just use kind of the default like light or dark color based on your wallpaper. Or if you want all your lock screen text and widgets to be bright yellow and your wallpaper is, a contrasting color, you can do that too. And so this is continuing to permeate sort of across the system. And while the tinting may not be for me personally either, I think a lot of people will like it. And I think the focus mode use is really enticing. I think a lot of people may go down that road too.
Oh, Steven, I just tried to make them orange. It looks pretty nice with orange. I got an email after we published the show, the show after the announcements of someone saying, the problem with this is everybody's iPhones are going to be ugly. But my response is, well, it's their iPhone. Well, make it ugly if they want.
Yeah, it's who cares? Like that's in the eye of the beholder, anyways.
Yeah.
And I saw, I'm not going to link to in the show notes because the take is so bad. I don't want to give them paid views, but I read something like basically that read that the home screen customization was like something that would never happen if Steve Jobs was still alive, which, number one, that's the laziest take in all of Apple commentary. Like, it just is. But who cares? Like, these are people's devices and they should reflect how they feel and look and, how they, all that's together. And so it's all a good thing.
Related is Control Center. We talked through the features last week, but now we've been using it. So let's share some field notes here. What do you think of the new Control Center?
It's wild. It is absolutely wild to me that they gave us customization there. Again, like see all my previous comments, I think it's awesome. I have played with this more than almost anything else in the betas, just trying to wrap my head around like what I want from Control Center. Because kind of by default, it's basically the way that it was with one change that I don't understand, which I'll come back to in a second. And then you have like a media page below, that you can scroll to beneath it. That's like basically a full screen, like kind of media controller. I think that's really nice. But like one thing, that's kind of frustrated me with Control Center up until this point is like some of the icons are kind of hard to tell apart at a glance. Like what's a stopwatch versus a timer look like? If it was a police lineup of Control Center icons, it was kind of hard to tell the differences before. But now you can, a lot of them, you can make them like 2 across and it says timer next to it. So like I'm experimenting with all those things, but I'm having fun doing it, which is cool.
Yeah, so my complaint, and I know this is beta one, so maybe this is on the roadmap for Apple, is I feel like they created the toolkit, but they didn't give us good examples. Like I would like to see them have recurated the
Oh
default
yeah.
control center in ways that they thought are interesting. What they did is just give us what we already had in essence, and it didn't change. But then if you go below, like media controls, there's a huge media control, like a 4 unit media control in the default. But then there's also a whole separate screen for media control. So why do you need it in both places? Like what, I feel like I would have liked to seen some of the smart people at Apple come up with alternatives. And like the community is going to do this. I bet on the Mac Power Users Forum, there'll be screenshots of these before this thing is too old, right?
Mm-hmm.
With really good ideas. But I would have liked to seen Apple rethink how this all looks. My guess is they probably decided not to do that because just like the photos thing, they don't want to shock people and they figure you can change it if you want. But I feel like if you're going to go to all this effort, why don't you use some of the smart people at Apple to redo it for me so I can see a different look to this?
That would be cool. I didn't consider that, but that would be neat to like have like some examples. Part of Control Center is hard to talk about right now because in addition to the customization where you can have the controls wherever you want, there's also third-party support there now, which is also
Yeah.
pretty sweet. Um,
Yeah.
so those are called control widgets, and developers will be able to basically have widgets that show up in there. And so third-party camera apps, I think lots of apps will have all sorts of things in there. And that's going to be really nice too. And I think in the conversation of like where things go, well, now things could go in Control Center. And, it's early days. We haven't seen what that's going to look like yet. Developers are just now working through that for the very first time. But I think Control Center like really could become this really interesting, vibrant place on the platform.
I hope so, man. I feel like the pieces are there. They've just got to get it figured out. And I am really looking forward to getting some third party apps here.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be really nice. I did mention one change Apple made in their own controls that just it boggles my mind. So the connectivity control, which if in iOS 17 is like, airplane mode, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and then it has a bunch of smaller ones you tap into, and then you see the other ones. They swapped AirDrop and cellular data. And so now you can turn AirDrop on for everybody for 10 minutes with just one tap instead of two. And if you need cellular data, you have to like go further in. And maybe it's just my own use, but that one really surprised me. It's like, wait, are people turning AirDrop on and off more than they're turning cellular on and off? Like maybe Apple knows, but that sort of jumped out at me as being not the way that I operate. So there's that.
Another one that's nice though is that they have a power off button now in Control Center.
Mm-hmm.
Top right, there's a little power button. You can tap that and turn the phone off. If you don't want to hold all the buttons down. I've always felt like it's weird that you've got to know the secret incantation to turn your phone off.
Yes. And, there is reporting that future iPhones would have like touch sensitive or capacitive buttons somehow. Another element of this is when you do push a hardware button, you get like, it's like the bezel comes in a little bit. Like you get this little like black pixel animation showing you where the button was. Like that plus the power button and Control Center is like, is Apple going to be simplifying the button layout on the phone where maybe that is how you turn the phone on and off and the 2 button across thing is going away? I mean, I saw this happen like 3 months ago. Someone in my family, I was like, oh, they were having issues. I was like, oh, hey, restart your phone. Step one of tech troubleshooting, restart the device.
Yeah.
And I saw them go into settings to do it. It's like settings, general, and then at the bottom somewhere is like restart. I was like, whoa. I didn't say anything. It's like they know what they're doing. I'm not gonna burden them with the additional knowledge of what 2 buttons to hold down. But it kind of opened up my eyes of like, oh yeah, like the sleep wake button has kind of gotten overloaded over the years, and maybe they're just going to make it software.
And the other thing I like is the dedicated home Control Center screen. because I have a lot of HomeKit stuff, and it's really nice to have one screen where it's all there. It's faster than going to the home app.
In fact, I suspect that the home app will be taken off my home screen. It is currently on home screen 1 on my phone.
Yeah.
And once I had the beta on my actual phone, because like my test phone, test Apple account, it doesn't know about my HomeKit stuff. But when I have it on a phone that does, I think I'm going to spend a little time like making basically a home control center sheet of all my HomeKit stuff. And honestly, I think the home app, between like widgets on the Today view, where I also have some HomeKit stuff, like I think that app will end up in the app library, and I will only go into it to set something new up. And I'm kind of excited about that. I think having like this really cool like control center HomeKit remote control for your house is going to be awesome. I think it will also make me wish that I could share that with my spouse, right? Because maybe it's true in your household, or listener, maybe it's true in your household. I feel like my wife mostly tolerates my HomeKit experimentation. And there have been times where I was like, I'm just going to take your phone for a little while. And like, I'll set home app up for her, set some widgets up for her to get through the common stuff. But how great would it be if I could take a control center sheet and to share it with everyone else in my home? Like, that would be so, we'd all have like a common set of tools. That'd be cool.
Yeah. I'm convinced that people will come up with creative solutions for this, along with the home screen stuff too. And that, 6 months from now, we're going to have some great ideas on the table. But you're right. Like, if I get the perfect HomeKit set up on my phone, I still have to go do it on my wife's phone too.
Yeah.
One follow-up point on that is one of the control center buttons now is the home app. So you can also put that in as a button in Control Center, which is just another reason to get the app off your home screen.
Yep. I think it's going to be fun to see what Control Center eats over the next year or so.
Yeah. This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by Ecamm. Go to ecamm.com/Zoom for a powerful live streaming platform for your Mac. Try it for free today. Ecamm Live is the leading video production and live streaming studio built for Mac. Ecamm does all aspects of video, not just live streaming. It's perfect for simplifying your workflow. It's easy enough to get started quickly, but powerful enough that you can create just about anything with video. You can do it all with the Ecamm app. I don't know how it happened, gang, but at some point along the way, I became a video producer for the internet. Ecamm is the native Mac app that makes it easy, particularly with Ecamm for Zoom, where you can add up to 8 Zoom participants as camera sources and the audio and video directly into Zoom meetings, webinars, and events. You can even create individual participant recordings automatically. If you want to record a Zoom call, Ecamm for Zoom is the way to do it. It's a powerful Mac app made by people who get the Mac, and you can see that in every element of this software. So stand out from the crowd with high-quality video and logos, titles, lower thirds, and graphics. Share your screen, drop in video clips, bring on interview guests, and even use a green screen. You can do all of that and more with Ecamm Live. And super exciting news, Ecamm for Zoom is now available for everyone on the pro level plan. So you can automatically send Ecamm Live's audio and video output into a Zoom meeting, Zoom webinar, or even Zoom event. And like I said, add up to 8 Zoom participants as camera sources in your broadcast or recording. Plus, you can automatically create individual participants, audio and video recordings, and add Zoom chat messages to your broadcast or recording as text overlays. Ecamm's members are entrepreneurs, marketing professionals, podcasters, educators, musicians, church leaders, bloggers, and content creators of all kinds. If you've got a Mac and you want to do something with video, you should check out Ecamm. And you can get 1 month free today at ecamm.com/Zoom using the code MacPowerUsers. That's a whole month for free of Ecamm Live at ecamm.com, ecamm.com/Zoom with the code MacPowerUsers. Go there now and check it out. And our thanks to Ecamm for their support of the Mac Power Users and all of Relay FM.
Okay, we're naming this section Grab Bag. So this was just some stuff that we wanted to touch on. And first for me is live activities and watchOS 11.
Yeah.
This is really cool because it is building on technology that Apple already has. So if you have a live activity running on your phone, it will now project to the smart stack in your Apple Watch. Is that stack of widgets if you rotate the digital crown. This works automatically. It works even if the app doesn't have a watchOS version, right? So if you're using some scorekeeping app and it doesn't have a watch app, which is probably possible, the smart stack still works. It's projecting over from your phone. And Apple is doing this by taking the elements of the smart stack, or elements of the live activity, and kind of remixing them visually on the watch. And developers will have direct control over that if they want to tweak it. But out of the gate, it just works, and it's pretty cool. I've really come to like live activities on the phone, and now they're just going to be like a fixture on the watch as well.
Another couple points as to the smart stack is I think it got smarter. Because I'm an idiot and I installed this on my main phone, my main watch, I don't have one to test it against, but the smart stack now knows the watch face you're using. Like when I'm using the ultra digital watch face, it repeats the same font in the smart stack for the watch display. Whereas if I'm using the California analog watch face, when I go into smart stack, it gives me an analog face. And just like, it looks like, I think that's new.
That is new, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I've just got more appreciation for the smart stack this year as it's got smarter. And once again, this frees you up to use almost any watch face you want, because if you want to get into details, you just scroll down and most of the stuff you want is there.
Yeah. They did get rid of the Siri watch face in watchOS 11, which I mean, like,
Yeah.
They basically built it and never touched it. So
yeah, they got rid of it the year after they installed it. They just never told us.
I could see a world where the smart stack kind of replaces that watch face. Like if you scroll up, you get the time and date, and then you get the smart stack below it. I honestly wouldn't mind that being a watch face I could have all the time, because the smart stack really, it answers the promise set out by the Siri face all those years ago. And I think especially with live activities making it more dynamic, I kind of would like the option just to like, hey, make the smart stack view, just make that my watch face. I think that would be, in some instances, really useful.
Yeah, agreed. And I also just think that the inherent limitations of the watch make it a prime target for Apple Intelligence. That I think of all the places on the watch is one of the best ones to have, quote unquote AI help you figure your way around the device and get more out of it. So I feel like this is a step. I don't think this is the final step on what's happening with the watch. And then you can add to that the rumors that, with the next Apple Watch, it's going to be a design change. I think there's more to the story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, possibly so.
Journal app, it released with a incredibly light set of features. It's still just on the phone, but you can now search it. And was there anything else I can do now? I think that's it. I can search it.
They brought the mental health tracking into it, but yeah,
that's right.
I really put this in the grab bag just to highlight, like it didn't make a big jump. It's not on the other apps. There's no import. It's still kind of its own thing over there.
I'd like to know the story behind this app. Like, are they just not that interested in it, or did they ship it too early?
Yeah.
It's like, this is so anemic in terms of features for journaling. macOS Sequoia window tiling. Okay, so I've spent a bunch of time with the new window tiling system, and in general, I like it. I definitely don't hate it like I have historically with Apple window tiling features. Like, the whole thing with the full screen and the split view. That was bad, and it was like really hassle to work around. But now this is more of kind of the magnetic windows that we've come to see in Windows and so many third-party applications on the Mac, where you can drag it to the corners and you can get like basically quadrants and halves. but they did more than the basics too. They also have the ability to use some keyboard modifiers, keyboard shortcuts, and other ways to implement it. So I feel like this is better than I expected when I saw that they were doing it.
I had a very similar reaction. It is really interesting, and it's also like they brought features to it that really wouldn't think, like dragging a window to the screen edge will take up that half of the screen. Like that's not like dragging windows to an edge is not a gesture we've seen in macOS from Apple before, and they've embraced it. Pretty cool.
But that is a behavior in a lot of these window tiling
Absolutely.
apps. Yeah.
Yeah, it absolutely is. As is the keyboard shortcut stuff. So with the window tiling in Sequoia, if you hold on the Option key and drag a window, it will tile them when you let go. Again, just making it a little bit quicker. And there's an option to turn margins on and off, and so this will put space between the window and the edge of the screen, and if possible, between windows. But Sequoia is fine with your windows overlapping as well. This isn't Stage Managery where it's trying to, like, it's kind of on rails. Like I had two Safari windows side by side, they don't overlap. But with Photos, they want to, I had the sidebar open, so that kind of sets the width of the window on my M1 MacBook Air. And so it let Photos overlap with Safari when I put them side by side. Like it seems to be intelligent about what the contents of the window are, and like not cutting your view down so much. And it feels really well done. I've actually been like pleasantly surprised at how this has turned out.
Some other things you can do with window tiling is, the green button, which puts an app into full screen mode. If you hold that, it gives you a bunch of options for window tiling, including like arranging all the windows on the desktop. And that is, I think, cleverly done. The other thing is the keyboard shortcuts are really useful and easy to remember. They use the globe key. Like my favorite trick by far is if you've got, like, often I'll have a right and the left side of the screen occupied with two apps. That's a very common setup for me. Like maybe Safari on the left and Drafts on the right or something. But if I want to switch them, I can just hold down Shift, Globe Control, and right or left, and it takes the two windows and changes their position at the same time. So you get the right and the left switched, which I've never been able to do with other apps, and I think that's kind of useful because like I don't sit centered on my big screen, and being able to switch those windows would be something I would do regularly. That's something that tempts me to install the beta on the machine, but I'm not ready for that yet. So you're okay. You're okay, Stephen. But yeah, I think the window tiling, I don't know. The jury's out for me. I'm enjoying it. I'm in the honeymoon period, but will it replace Moom for me? I don't know. We'll see. Like Moom has some automation stuff and
Yeah.
Apple script support. So I'm a power user. Maybe it won't, but boy, it's much further along than I expected it to be. And even if I don't use it 100% of the time, I think I'm going to be using it.
Yeah. Yeah. And like so many other things like this will be new to a lot of people. And, if they want more, then they'll discover Moom or, the many other options out there. And in true window management on the Mac fashion, they didn't get rid of any of the old stuff, right? So the old full screen and full screen split view are still there. Mission control is still there. Stage manager is still there as its own weird mode, not associated with anything else. Apple just layers these things on top of each other and lets you use what you want. And I think that's fine. Like I'm poking fun of it a little bit, but I actually think it's fine because people want to manage these windows in different ways. My frustration with this is like this tiling, I think I said it last week. The tiling system seems like it'd be great on the iPad, but you're stuck with Stage Manager or the old split view slide over system. So
yeah.
still a little bit different on the iPad, but I think Apple's clearly thought this through. And yes, they've taken a lot of things from the ecosystem, but they seem to have taken the best parts of it and are leaving room for people who want more complicated, more intricate setups.
Yeah, agreed. On Sequoia, I think this is the one that has the least amount of announced features. iPhone, what do they call it, the view continuity mode with the iPhone, where you can
Uh-huh.
put the iPhone up, have it, play apps on your Mac screen, have it, become basically your remote iPhone. That's not there yet. Um, Apple Intelligence isn't anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of things we haven't been able to try yet in Sequoia, and it makes Sequoia feel pretty makes it feel pretty lean.
Sparse. Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I think they'll get there,
Yeah.
hopefully.
Overall, the betas have been, with the caveats we said at the beginning of the show, they've been pretty solid for me. I'm enjoying using them. I'm able to do all my work except ScreenFlow capture on the MacBook. Otherwise, I'm good. And there's a workaround for that. I just use QuickTime to record the screen. But solid year, but also a year in which the betas most deliberately do not have all of the announced features. I think of all the years in past, there's the most amount of features held back out of the initial beta in this year.
I think so too. And it's kind of weird that this stuff's going to roll out over time, but that may be the case even after the fall. We're talking about things aren't in the beta now. Some of
Yeah.
this stuff may not be in, if you believe the reporting, some of this may not be in the release in September or October or whatever. Some of the stuff may take a little bit longer.
Do you think Apple got caught with its pants down on AI?
I think to a degree.
I think that they definitely have been doing work on it, but I think they're incorporating it into the operating system earlier than they expected to.
Yeah, I think that's more than fair.
Yeah. But, just get it right. That's all I ask. I mean, I'm continuing to think about Apple Intelligence. That's by far the most interesting thing coming out of WWDC this year. After the show published, several people wrote me to tell me how wrong I was because, the other AI LLMs are more powerful. So Apple clearly has got it wrong. I don't believe that. I still think that Apple's got a good idea here of hanging it on these principles of privacy, usefulness, personal. But the thing that worries me is that we haven't used it yet. We haven't seen whether or not they did it. As I said last time, you can write a check, but you still got to be able to cash it.
Yeah,
And Siri to me is the reason for my doubt, because Siri just never got better. And I suspect that's because it just never got the priority and resources it needed to get better. And maybe now that now that Wall Street's interested, they'll actually give this what it needs to work. But there is a part of me that's afraid they're not going to be able to pull it off.
yeah, I think that's totally fair. And if this stuff comes out and it's not good or not useful, like they're gonna have they're gonna have some problems on their hands. Not
Yeah,
only I think from the Wall Street perspective, and I think I said this last time, but I'll say it again. Windows and Android have features like this. It's Apple's OSs that don't. And whether or not we think it's useful or a fad or long term productivity boost or whatever, they've got to be competitive on these fronts. And I do think the world moved faster than they were expecting. I mean, they were making hires a long time ago. This stuff didn't just start when
yeah,
OpenAI, came out of secrecy, but clearly they are starting in an Apple-like fashion behind everybody else, more constrained than everybody else. But at the same time, that's kind of their MO, and it's worked out
yeah.
really well for them over and over throughout history. So maybe we're seeing that happen yet again. Maybe not, but maybe, just maybe we are.
Well, I feel like the term getting caught with your pants down is probably the wrong term here, because they've been putting neural engines in their phones longer than anybody else. But I think the software stack part of it is where I'm nervous, because they didn't prove they could do it with Siri at any point up until today. They still haven't proven it.
Yeah.
But if I had to bet $1,000, I'd say they're going to pull it off. I'm more optimistic than anything else because I feel like they understand the stakes. And the reason why it's not in the beta is because they're still working on it, but they're going to put a lot of effort into it. And I suspect at the end of the day, this is all going to be okay. But it's not a guarantee at this point.
It's going to be a wild summer, man. I can't wait.
Yeah, agreed. Hey, we're the Mac Power users. You can find us over at relay.fm/MPU. If you'd like to get the ad-free extended version of the show, like today, Steve and I are going to talk about thinner device rumors, we would love to have you as a supporting member. It's huge for us. It's very important to help us keep the lights on. You can do that over at relay.fm/MPU. We also want to thank our sponsors, NetSuite, ZocDoc, and Ecamm, along with all those great supporters in the More Power Users community. So go check that out. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.